Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of our podcast Epilogue, where today I spent some time talking with Nate Clark. He's a longtime member of our church. He's on our staff as an intern working with young adults, and he's incredibly creative. And so we wanted to pick his brain about beauty, art, as we continue the discussion in Genesis chapter 2. So we hope you enjoy the conversation. Nate, thanks for joining us on the podcast and hanging out with us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're new to our folks who listen to our podcast and watch it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up in the church, and what brings you here today, all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up at Faith Bible Church. My parents moved here when I was like 2 years old, and I've been attending pretty much ever since. I was in youth group in high school, and then I graduated high school, went to college, and studied. I studied fine arts at UT. Graduated in 3 years with my bachelor's. Went out to West Texas, did some welding school.
Which is a different kind of art.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, well, I originally learned how to weld in my sculpture program at UT.
Oh,
And
cool.
I was like, I better learn how to actually do this well. And then the welding school, and I didn't actually ever finish welding school, but I got enough to be proficient, which was the
Yeah.
goal. Um, and then moved back here. Got plugged in with the young adults program about 2 years ago, and then this year started interning, and that's been a ton of fun. Just getting to um, just work with our people and pour into them, and um, even learning some of the behind the scenes of like, oh wow, there's a lot of work that goes into ministry, the information that you have to process and be aware of.
So we don't just work one day a week. You can
Nope.
you can attest to that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very good. I'll give you $20 later. That's good. Fun. So you're interning with young adults?
hmm
Yeah, so seeing some things differently in ministry. What's another big takeaway for you? I know you interned this summer. You're back at it again this fall, helping with our young adults, working with them. What's another big takeaway as you think of your time here at Faith Bible Church?
I've really enjoyed um, the community aspect, not only of uh, serving amongst my peers and getting to be part of something like that, but then also coming in on the staff side, and growing up, I was always looking at these pastors and these people and like, oh, they're so high above me, and now
Mm,
I'm kind of working, shoulder to shoulder with some of these
yeah,
guys, and I'm just like, they're just people too, and
yeah, we are.
I don't know, that's been really cool, and it's been such an honor.
Mm,
I think the Lord has been faithful in blessing me and showing me that um I don't know, some of these things that I never thought that I would have or be capable of. He's like, nah, in my strength, you can do a whole lot more than you think you could.
yeah,
And so some of these blessings and these opportunities that I've had in the last couple of years I think have just been little pictures of that. It's been really cool.
good. Well, man, it's great having you on the team, and thanks for all you're doing. So, yeah. Um, I know like the interning thing's really a side gig for you because you primarily are a handyman. So you
Mm.
work with your hands, painting, fixing things. You kind of do a lot of different things that way, right?
Yeah, so actually I have 5 or 6 jobs, depending on how you count them. But so my primary thing, what takes the most time in my week and what makes me the most money is working as a handyman.
Yeah.
And I just do that independently, helping people fix their houses, get things in order. And then I intern here at the church. And then I work with 2 theater companies. I grew up doing musical theater in high school, and so I'm on staff with CYT. I manage their storage warehouse, and that's been a really cool development of just showing up on weekends and helping them build their set pieces and
Mm,
learning how to just turn a bunch of lumber and raw pieces of material into these scenes that have story to them. It's really awesome. And then through that process, they're like, wow, Nate, you have a design degree, you're really good at organizing. Like, you just make sure that this doesn't stay a mess. um, I'm also on staff with Woodlands Christian Academy in their fine arts department. Phil Swager from our church hired me
yeah.
out. Really awesome opportunity. Got my brother a job too. Um, and so working with my brother has been really fun, and
That new building out there is amazing.
it's huge. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they've got this massive LED wall that I'm creating some images for, and it's been super cool. A lot of fun to do some experiments, and so I'm doing digital art. I'm doing handyman work. I'm doing design work. Um, and when I graduated college, I didn't really think that I wanted to be an artist, but then somehow in all these different areas of my life, I'm applying these different skills in ways that I didn't expect, but I'm still actually using skills that I learned in college. So
Yeah.
it's actually been a really cool way. Another way that I'm seeing a bunch of stuff come full circle.
Cool. So for us, I mean, your name came to mind for the podcast as we were thinking about Genesis 2, beauty. When I think of beauty, I think of art. I think of some of the skill sets you have, our ability to appreciate it, our ability to create. There's so many things that, from a biblical Christian worldview, that we would say, man, we have this ability and these
Mhm.
capabilities because God first of all created with beauty, and then he gave us this innate ability to appreciate it, to see it, and then we can follow his creative, modeling, and we're creative as well. So um, let's talk a little bit about your work at UT when you
Mhm.
were there as a student. I mean, when you think of UT, you think of Austin. There's art, there's live music. I mean, it's all around, right?
Yeah.
Um, as a believer in that environment, what were some of the differences in the way that you were able to appreciate or maybe create or take in some of those classes as opposed to people who were um, maybe didn't have that biblical Christian worldview?
Absolutely. There were a lot of differences. There are definitely a lot of differences there. And I could talk more about it was a really difficult experience
Hmm.
being a Christian in UT, especially at the art school. But specifically about how I was able to approach art in a different way from them was, um, I think for a lot of them it was a way to explore their own identity, or it was a way that they processed
Hmm.
information and tried to understand themselves.
Yeah.
And because I think art is primarily, it's a form of communication, whether you're expressing emotions or thoughts, or critique or criticism, or um, whatever it is, it's a form of expression and of beauty. And so for them, it was their art was either retelling their story or processing these elements of who that they believed that they were. And
Which isn't wrong in and of itself.
absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's a little limited for what art can be. In that, if we recognize that art comes first and foremost from God, then getting to share in that characteristic of God, where He's a creator and I'm a creative,
Mm.
and He's an imaginator. He imagines things, and I get
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
imagine things, and
Yeah.
um, it's just super cool that he loves us enough to share those characteristics with us.
Yeah.
And so getting to appreciate myself and my identity as an extension of God. You might even tie that into the call and the responsibility of being image bearers.
Yeah.
But I think that adds an extra element and a depth to art, and even it pulls you in with other Christian artists, and that we all, in our own unique ways, image different parts of God. And I think one of my favorite verses, especially related to art, is Psalm 19:1, talking about the heavens declare
Mm.
the glory of God, and the skies declare His handiwork, um, or something like that. I don't think I did it
Yep.
verbatim,
Yeah.
but
You're good.
um, and so I have a series of artwork, some digital pieces that I've done, or photography pieces, where I take pictures of the sky, usually sunsets. I love sunsets and sunrises; they're just so vibrant. And then I'll usually get the ground as a silhouette, whether I can backlight it, or sometimes I'll go in and edit afterwards. But just having this tree line or a cityscape, or sometimes I'll find statues and get them backlit, or I have a couple of some rock sculptures, and um, it pulls the attention into the color and the vibrance, and if there's clouds, it adds texture and
Mm.
just this rich depth. And so being able to emphasize the work of the Lord and all the work that I'm doing is just holding up a little picture frame to it and like, look how cool our God is.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Yeah, Psalm 19 was a psalm obviously that comes to mind when you think of this. The heavens declare the glory of God, the sky above proclaims his handiwork.
Mhm.
Day to day pours out speech, night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Like it, the heavens are declaring that. And so when you take that snapshot and you get a little bit of it and you frame it, I mean, that's what you're saying is you're just putting God's creative work on display for us to, if we could, listen to the glory of God, because that's what it's declaring.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. Um, yeah, thanks for it's really neat to hear you talk through the differences of being able to appreciate art from a biblical standpoint and from a Christian worldview to say, hey, I'm an image bearer, and if this isn't just about expressing myself, but there's a piece of that, but it's also about pointing back to God
Hmm.
and understanding that He's given us these gifts. So super cool. You also talk about the idea that we have a creative ability because God gave us that. He's
Hmm.
obviously incredibly creative. And as a result, we have abilities to be creative. That can be with woodworking, painting, being a handyman. It could be building sets for CYT or creating sculptures like you did. So talk a little bit about that creative process for you. You don't have to go into a ton of detail, but what that looks like is you appreciate seeing something not necessarily from nothing, but taking raw material, building it and seeing something created from that.
Sure. Um, Yeah, and I like to think back to one of the original instances of God sharing His creative ability with His people in order to create and craft things is in Exodus. It's one of the first instances that we have of the Holy Spirit filling a bunch of craftsmen to do incredible jewel work and gold work to create the tabernacle. And um, I don't know that every instance of creating art that we have in modern days is a work of the Holy Spirit
Yeah.
necessarily, but
Yeah.
I think it all stems from that and is inspired by that, which is just a cool way to frame my work. Um, and I have kind of two main avenues that I pursue in my artwork. One of them is digital images, like the sky pieces is a segment of that. But most of my digital work is inspired by music. I have an ability called synesthesia, which is as simple as two different senses in your brain having a connection to each other. Most everyone has a connection between the sense of taste and the sense of smell.
Yeah.
They're just related to each other. And then some people have additional associations. So for me, when I hear noise, not like individual sounds like the snapping of a finger, but like the general noise of a crowd or music, um, my brain interprets it as color and texture and depth and shape.
You
And
call that, say that word again?
synesthesia.
Let's go. I'm
Yeah,
learning something new
it's
here.
super cool.
Yeah.
And so basically when I listen to music, if I really pay attention to it, it's like my brain starts filling with these images. And so a lot of
Wow.
my work is to just bring those into reality. So that other people so I can share that with other people so they can see it. And yeah, I don't remember what your question was, but that's
Yeah, well, just talking about that ability to create, like I have, there's nothing in me that would see that, but it
mm,
is absolutely unique that God has given you that unique ability that I don't know if I have it or not. If I do, that I have not been aware of it. Now, the whole taste and smell thing, I do have that.
great.
But to hear something and then to visualize textures and the things that you're talking about, and then to be able to take that what's in your mind and put it in some sort of digital artwork. I mean, to me, that is a picture of God giving you a unique ability to create that reflects His, creative nature.
Yeah.
So, what are some other things you talked about? Set building
Mhm.
earlier. What are some other ways that you can see some of this creative aspect?
Yeah, and so then if kind of half of my work is the digital work, the other half of my work is sculpture based. And in college, I did a lot of metal metalwork, a bunch of welding and stuff. Um, and I love just the element of getting my hands dirty and creating something out of nothing, and really reducing a material down to its base components in order to then kind of pull it back out into a new form.
Hmm.
Um, and then that also translates into set building. And I love the story aspect of set building, where you take an object that um, is just raw material, and I get to say this thing's gonna have the actual history of the object of it started as a piece of plywood, and I cut it into shapes, and I formed it into a box, and then I painted it, and that's its actual history. But the narrative of the box might be, well, let's see, if I paint some lines into it, I can make it look like it's a bunch of different boards of wood, and if I
Hmm.
then slap some gray paint, it looks like it's dirt, or um, maybe I can cut some scratches into it to make it look like, oh, maybe this cart rushed past and it scraped it or whatever. And
Hmm.
so then it's got this narrative of all that, this life that this wooden crate has lived, but the actual history of the box is just um, that it was built in a garage in an afternoon. And so these two
Yeah.
things can be true at once. And
So you're creating it with some age and distinction. So that's the narrative you're talking about.
yeah,
So I'm creating this box for a musical or a play, and it needs to have this story built into it. And so you do that, and what may seem like an aged piece was is reality, just a couple years old or whatnot. And for you, we were talking earlier, just the idea that you know could it be that the earth is millions of years old but also 6,000 years old at the
yeah,
same time, or whatever the time frame is, because God created it with a story and a narrative already in place.
right.
And that's one many theories out there of all of this and how all of the fossil record and everything goes together,
hmm
but it is pretty fascinating to think about it from that standpoint.
Yeah, I love the fossil record. The geologic history is incredibly consistent, and would take this immense, s- just incredibly smart being in order to, if that were a story that's created, in order for that to actually work, like that would take computers decades just of processing computer
Mm,
power in order to generate something that immense, and to have it be consistent. Like AI these days, it could try to create something like that, but it can't even, if you tell it to like generate a picture of a birthday cake that says happy birthday on it, it can't even get those letters right. Let alone, create billions of years of consistent, like, oh, this continent crashed into that continent and created these mountains and that stuff. Um and so just the incredible, awesome power and intellect that God would have to have in order to have generated that. If it is, oh, God, snapped his fingers and boom, there was the world, and then it had the appearance of age, or whether it actually somehow both has the age and is new, or however that works. Like Adam was created as an adult, so the world was created mature, like whatever that looks like. But
mm,
um it just again, it speaks to the majesty and the wonder of God.
absolutely. um It is fascinating if you go to an art gallery, you go watch sculptures, maybe you watch a theater performance. My daughter's got a show in a couple of weeks, and we'll watch it. And I have the ability to see all that has gone into that. And I don't get to
Mm,
see all of it, but I know all the rehearsal times. I hear we've added this, we did our dress rehearsal, check out the costume. Like, it comes incrementally, and then when I get there, I get to see it. And she's already done a few of the dances here and said a few of the lines. And I get it, bits and pieces. Whereas other people are going to sit there and they're going to see it, and it's going to be great. But there's something about watching it along that I can maybe appreciate a little bit more.
yeah.
I feel like Genesis 1 and 2 is that for us.
Mm,
Is that when you do take in a sunrise or a sunset that you absolutely love, and it is amazing, and the colors, and it's vibrant, all of those words that describe it. For us to know there's Genesis 1 and 2, and we get a sneak peek as to, man, this is it. Like, I don't have all the details, but I got enough to know that's not an accident. This is a
mhm.
creative God who put this into play, and it's breathtaking. Is that helpful as you think through kind of the bits and pieces. I'm sure for you as a set designer and builder for some of these musicals and theater performances that you can say, "Ah, I saw see how
Yeah,
this comes together?"
absolutely. Well, and yeah, and seeing all the you get an appreciation for just what it takes. I think that's the mistake. A lot of people walk up to an abstract, here's an abstract piece of art, or Jackson Pollock paintings, and
Mm,
um they walk into the gallery and they're like, my 2-year-old could do that. Like, why is this going for a
yeah,
million dollars? And because they
yeah,
they think it looks simple, but they don't have an appreciation for the skill or the time that went into it, or maybe it was the frame was made out of cherry oak, and the paint that was used was actually $1,000 a gallon, or something like that. Um and so it's like the intrinsic value alone is going to be high. um but then also, I think there's this story that circulates in the art world, and I don't know if it's actually um, if this actually happened, but it communicates the idea really well of Pablo Picasso sitting in a restaurant, and this lady walks up to him, and she's like, draw something for me on this napkin. Here's a pen. Here's a napkin, and she sits it down, and he sketches something out real quick, and he's like, this is like $1 million. um, and she's like, "It's a drawing on a napkin, like, it literally took you 2 minutes, like, why are you charging me $1 million for this?" And he's like, "It didn't take me 2 minutes to make this drawing, it took me my entire life, it took 30, 40, 50 years of practice to make this image."
mm,
Um, and so I think it's really easy for us to look at a thing and just say, "Oh, for what this is and what I can see, I determine the value of this." But someone who has an understanding and appreciation of the thing can look at it and say, no, I see deeper. I can see beyond what you see.
mm.
And I know that there's actually much more value in this because of everything that had to go into it.
Yeah. I think about medical profession. I got a buddy who is a retina specialist, and when he talks about the eye, and for him, it's just clear there is a creator. This is amazing how all of this comes together. He talks about like the retina, if it's just apart from the eye, it can float. Like, I mean, and when he describes it, you're like, yeah. When I see an eye, I just think, man, I can read or I can see things. But for him to see all of the details and the intricacies of it, it clearly for him points to a creator that is in amazing in his work. Um, Couple of books that I'm no artist. I love to appreciate it. I wish I had some of these abilities, but I don't. I can't. I can't paint. I can't do any of this
Mm,
stuff. But I love going to an art gallery. I love watching my kids do a symphony or being in a musical. I love that stuff. I'm not very good at it. There was a book called Rembrandt in the Wind, which was a book on Rembrandt, but several other artists, and it just gave background to their work.
mm,
And so then when you look at those works, you're just able to appreciate a little bit more what you're talking about. For me, it was helpful to be reminded of all that goes into it, people's experiences, their life stories, and then when I see a painting or a piece of art from one of these artists, I just have a deeper appreciation. Read another one by about Van Gogh, and it's just been I just look at his art very differently now
yeah.
that I've seen the backstory and heard a little bit more about it. Um, I guess that's really my hope as we look at Genesis 1, 2, and
Mm,
3 is for us to see that backstory. And then when we go out and we see creation and art and all the things that are so beautiful in the world that aren't limited to art or just physical things, but so many other opportunities for us to see beauty in the world. I hope that Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is the backstory that we have just a greater appreciation for all that God has done and how He's working. So super cool. As you think through Genesis 2, Genesis 1, What are some of your other thoughts in terms of beauty on display, creativity of God, as you process that through maybe more of an artistic mind frame than some of us? What are some other thoughts you might have?
Sure. As I've been reading through it with this series, came into some realizations that I didn't previously have. I think it was really sweet the way that the way that the Lord brought Adam along into His work.
Mm,
Of God could have just done everything on His own and said, "Boom, this is exactly how I want it, and these are what these animals to be named." And um, instead, because he's a God of fellowship and of deep relationship, he brings Adam alongside, and he says, "Hey, come and join me in this work, and this is for you. And so I want you to have a hand in it." And he allows Adam to have input, even though he's so much of a lesser being than God, bringing him into that. And um, I I think that's really special.
mm,
Of we think, oh, the master is going to be able to create the best work on his own, but sometimes it takes that fresh perspective,
mm,
and just a little bit of a taste of that can totally reshape um, the thing, and for the better. Um, I think other really cool instances of beauty that I see in the Genesis account is the structure of the chiasm, and the way that it all points to rest,
mm,
is super cool and super important, and still in that vein of appreciation of knowing and seeing that it all begins, all of the everything about the Sabbath and rest begins in creation. When you see God begin to command it in Exodus with the manna, and then you see Him establish it in the
mm,
Ten Commandments and throughout the rest of the Torah. um, and then Jesus coming in and talking about the Sabbath was not man was not created for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was created for man. Um, and it deepens your appreciation for how much God cares for me.
mm.
And it all begins page one.
Yeah,
And that's also really cool. It's you get to see this theme reoccurring throughout the entire Bible.
yeah. Tons of things in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 are just going to keep popping back up, whether that's the curse, the fall, marriage, all kinds of the
Mhm.
rest, obviously. Uh,
Marriage is another really cool one. When we studied Ephesians,
yeah.
um, realizing that in chapter 4 or 5, where it talks about we are his flesh and bone, as a reference to Adam calling Eve bone of my bone and flesh of my
Mm,
flesh.
yeah.
And so then and Paul says this is a great mystery, in that it talks about the church in Christ. And so it's like God's been setting these things up from the very beginning, and they all start to pay off as history unfolds.
Yep.
Um, and I'm just like, man, like it talks about the manifold wisdom of God being revealed in Ephesians. And I'm just like, manifold indeed.
Yeah.
There's just so many facets to it.
We've been talking, I mean, we're talking about, art and creating things, but obviously when you think about the 66 books of our inspired Bible, it's a work of art, right?
Mm,
Because it is unfolding the redemption story from the very beginning with all of these different authors at different times, but all pointing in and coming to these same themes, primarily the redemption of man. Absolutely. That's another way that God shows his creativity. So I love it, Nate. It's great to talk to somebody who can appreciate art and
mm,
think about it from a different perspective. I'm super grateful for folks who have this ability and talent. It's not to say that none of us are, we're all creative in our own ways, right? I do some things that you can't do, and vice versa. We all
absolutely.
have them. And we all reflect that creativity. We just may do it. Some people do it through spreadsheets. Some people do it through music. Some people do it through paint or woodwork or welding or a host of ways. And that
Yep.
just shows to your point, the manifold ability of God to create and give us that same thing. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for
Hmm.
what you're doing. Love having you on the team. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm honored that you thought of me. This is great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you guys for joining us again on the podcast. And yeah, we'll do it again next week. Thank you guys.